Welcome to another episode of the Your Longevity Blueprint podcast. Today, my guest is Andy Pace, who's a healthy home concierge with over 30 years of experience in the healthy home building materials industry. He's the founder of the Green Design Center and host of the Non-Toxic Environments podcast. He's an expert at creating healthy homes that are non-toxic and free of off-gassing. He has a strong focus on mold prevention and remediation and works with contractors and home builders around the world to create healthy breathing within the home through proper HVAC systems, humidifiers, and other modes of healthy ventilation. His projects and expertise have been featured in numerous media outlets and industry podcasts, including Men's Health, Architectural Digest, and Wellness Mama, just to name a few. Welcome to the show, Andy.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. It's absolutely my pleasure to be here with you today.
This is going to be a little different topic for my guests, but I was excited to have you on because, as you know, my goal is to one day, it's going to be a big project, build a healthy, non-toxic home, not necessarily green home, and we'll differentiate that through the show. And I've only just started the process, and I had one consultation with you, and through that, I thought, man, I should have recorded all that, had it on the show. Whoops. Well, that was months ago, and here we are now. So I'm going to record you today so that my audience can hear from you just tips on how important healthy home construction is. I know a lot of my guests have interest in that. So we'll get started. But first, I want to ask your story. So how the heck did you, years ago, kind of get into this healthy home industry?
Quite honestly, it was, I guess, it was fate, I guess.
Yeah.
So all throughout my childhood, I remember sitting at the dinner table with my family. My family has owned a commercial construction material supply company that dates back to the 1930s.
So it's in your blood. Yeah.
It is my blood. And so growing up, at the dinner table, we didn't talk about school or sports or whatever. We talked about contractors and architects and projects.
Yeah.
And I kind of got the taste of it really young. Fast forward a bit, I'm out of school and I decided to start working for the family business. This is 1989. And about 3 years into my career, my job was to work with architects and engineers to make sure they specified and detailed the correct materials for certain situations. Basically being called a manufacturer's representative or a product rep. Well, one of the products that I was working with was a company that made water-based coatings for industrial use, parking garages, airplane hangars, real high abuse areas. And I remember on this project, we were supplying a water-based epoxy coating for a below-grade parking structure. Now, our crew was doing the work. We put up all the barricades, all the plastic where we needed to. We thought we were doing all the protection needed to. We started getting phone calls from people living in the condos above this parking garage complaining of the odors.
Yeah.
We thought, well, this is ridiculous. I mean, it's water-based material. Maybe somebody saw a can being opened and they decided to complain because that has happened. So, all right, well, we took on our advisement. We made sure we were being careful with how we were mixing things. 3 of our workers were taken to the hospital because of inhalation complications.
Yikes.
They literally couldn't breathe because the curing of this primer coat was sucking the oxygen out of the room.
Wow.
And so, yes, we were scared. We were poisoning our workers, our customers, threatening the 60-plus year history of being in business. And I was young in the industry and very nervous. Found a very small company in California called AFM, American Formulating and Manufacturing, and they make products for people with chemical sensitivities and environmental illness. I knew nothing about that at the time, but they said they had a product that would work. I got it. It worked. And it just like the light hit me that if there are products on the market that are truly healthier for the users, healthier for the occupants, this is what we should be focusing on. And from that point on, I actually started a spin-off of the family business, doing nothing but what we called common sense, healthy building materials.
Love it. Can we go back to that product that was off-gassing, I guess, if that's what you call it?
Sure.
So it was water-based. So what does that even mean?
Yeah,
I mean, that does sound healthier, right? But
exactly. We thought that too. And that's why it's such a great question. We found out the hard way that water-based only means that 50% of the liquid is water. The other 50% of the liquid in the product, can be xylene, acetone, ammonia, you name it. Even today, when you see products that are called zero VOC paints and coatings, that doesn't mean zero toxins. It just means it doesn't have certain ingredients that'll contribute to outdoor air pollution.
Right. Okay, so maybe we'll just get into then
Yeah.
what's the difference between a green home and a healthy home? Kind of before
Yeah.
in the introduction, I was saying I want a healthy home, not necessarily a green home. And I think many times those terms are maybe not intertwined, they're confused, I think. So can you differentiate for the audience what those are?
Certainly. Certainly. I think um, the easiest way to say it is healthy homes are inherently green. Green homes aren't necessarily healthy.
That's good. That's good.
And so here's the genesis of it. Back in the mid 90s, we had already gotten our start in business. To the mid to late 90s, an organization called the United States Green Building Council started. They created what's called the LEED program, Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. It was a way to measure how eco-friendly, sustainable, energy efficient a building can be. And they got certain point values for doing certain things. And at the end of the day, you were awarded a score.
Which has literally nothing to do with health. I mean, is what I'm,
Nothing to
yeah,
do
okay.
with health. Exactly. So we had customers coming into our retail showroom and saying, do you have products that meet the LEED standards for paint? And I'd ask the question, well, why would you like that? Well, I want to get a greenhouse, a safe house. I said, do you realize those two words are different? And
Lots
so
of re-education having to happen. Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So I had to create my own green product rating system 22 years
Mm-hmm.
ago, called Degree of Green, where I separated. There's three main categories of what could be called green: sustainable, environmentally friendly, and human friendly. In those three categories would be a total of 27 different descriptors of why it's called that way: recycled content, where it's made, is it toxin free, does it off gas, and so on and so forth. And so at this point, then I'd have customers coming in, and the best way to describe it is the three different customers that would come into the showroom. The first one would come in and say, we have a child with autism. Autistic children have a very hard time being around chemical off-gassing because
Yeah,
it exacerbates their symptoms.
yeah.
And so can we build a home that's completely free of chemical off-gassing? So I'm looking for a degree of green from a human health standpoint in materials. The next customer walks in and says, I've been on the earth for 55 years. I've been a burden to the earth for 55 years. Do you have the ability to help me remodel a home using nothing but recycled, repurposed, renewed materials? Completely different from the first customer.
Right,
Right?
right.
Third customer walks in and says, I want to build a home with the lowest carbon footprint. Well, that's location of manufacture, transportation, energy use in the installation and usage. Again, of all those three customers, neither one of them are incorrect, but they have their different way of how they look at green.
Their perspective, yeah.
Exactly. So I focused on the human health aspect mainly because that was my passion. I certainly help with the others, but I really focus on the human health because my, I guess, motto for the last 30 years has been, what good is saving the environment if we're still poisoning the occupants?
Dun, dun, dun. That's good. Yeah, let's focus this podcast on creating a human-friendly
Mm-hmm.
home.
Right.
So, where does one even begin? I think that's why I came to you, as I was quite frankly overwhelmed. I thought, where does this begin? Does this begin with lot selection, everything from the grade of the land to which direction the front door is facing, and like, like
Mm-hmm.
where does this really begin? So
Well,
let's talk about with new home construction, and then we
okay.
can also go to with like renovating a current home. But with
All
new
right.
home construction, where does this begin?
So where this begins is first finding out exactly what the health issues are of the occupants, if there are any, or if are we just trying to achieve the best we can?
Right.
So I have clients that are not only chemically sensitive, but they're also sensitive to electromagnetic fields.
Mm-hmm.
They're also very sensitive to the magnetic fields that are found in the ground, just because of
Wow,
the Earth's
yeah, that makes sense.
polarities.
Yep.
And so, yes, it could go down to lot selection, lot direction. Was the lot ever used for a farm field? And if it was, did they use pesticides? Those sort of things.
Yeah, I
It,
mean, this makes total sense, but
yeah. So where I
yeah. Well, I'm in
so
Iowa. I feel like all of the lots at one point were
right.
farmland.
So let me talk everybody off the ledge now. Um, if you do anything to make your home healthier, it's better than nothing. Okay.
Mhm.
I always tell people the very first easiest step you can do is make healthier cleaners, use healthier cleaners in your house, take your shoes
Right.
off, things like that. And that
Right.
makes a huge
Small
difference, right?
steps. Yep.
But in building a home, it always comes down to, when I'm working with a client, it is, what are we dealing with? What are we protecting from? And how far do you want to take it? Because you can take it to the nth degree, and it's going to cost a lot because you're doing so much more than an average
Hmm.
build.
Right.
If you are comparing apples to apples, quality level to quality level, building a healthy home should not cost more than building a traditional home. All
That's
right.
good to know. Okay.
But what happens is, when you're doing a healthy home, there are so many new things to consider that the average home builders don't even think about. This is where the pricing starts to go up and up and up. And you have to decide, is it worth it? Where's that point of return?
Right. And I wish we had, I think I told you before, there's, to my knowledge, last time I looked, only one building biologist in our state, and very few, I would say, like human, if you, very few builders who are
Right.
conscious to making that home like human friendly, if that makes sense. That's where you
Right.
come in, consulting with someone like you who can talk to the builder and, yeah,
Exactly.
yes. So let me go back to that. Okay. So
Okay.
what things should we be prioritizing just in general in our home, in our existing home, to make our living environment healthier? When I had
Sure.
spoke with you before, I was kind of asking, what are the big, I'm thinking of what's off gassing, like what are the big things that are going to be problematic even in a new home? And I know we were talking about flooring and cabinets. Just, I guess I should go back, walls
Mhm.
for sure, because you're painting the walls, right? The flooring could off gas, the carpeting, cabinets. I mean, that's what my novice brain is going to,
Well,
at least in that direction. But
your
you tell
your
me,
your your novice brain actually hit quite a bit of it, because honestly, 90% of the chemical off gassing that you'll experience in your home will come from the things you see and touch on a daily basis. So whether you're building a new home or remodeling existing,
mhm,
still that same 90% of potential exposure are coming from the things you're probably installing. Flooring materials, number one, because not only is it a large expanse, but it's also very thick. You think of the thickness of engineered wood or carpet or what have
mhm.
you. And I'll give you this pointer. Carpet is the worst thing you can have in your house, no matter what. Unless it's a non-toxic synthetic free carpet. And there's a couple of brands in the market, but 99.9% of the carpets used today are highly toxic.
So you're going to have to spill the beans on that. So, so what is it that's off gassing from the carpet that's making it so toxic? Like what, the synthetic, what is it?
Generally, it's formaldehyde.
Okay.
Formaldehyde is not added as a specific ingredient in carpet. Matter of fact, very few products still have formaldehyde or formalin added as a specific ingredient. It comes out of a cured surface because of the chemical process of what was being created. So, for instance, in carpeting, you'll get formaldehyde coming from the dyes that were used on the
Mm,
fibers.
okay.
You'll get formaldehyde coming from the styrene butadiene rubber, that sponge backing on that backside of the carpet. You'll
Sure.
get formaldehyde coming from that. Anything that has a flame retardant, a pesticide, or a mildewcide, most often that will release small bits of formaldehyde.
Okay, so I want to go two directions. One, I want to ask how long is that going to off gas for, right? Obviously, there's that new home construction smell where
Yeah.
all kinds of crap is off gassing.
Right.
But then in my existing home, which was built, I don't know, 13 years ago, I'm not really smelling anything off gassing anymore. So are those risks now gone? And then I want to come back to what the healthy carpet, the
Got it.
better option is. So
Yeah.
two directions. How long does off gassing last for?
There's two different types of off gassing that happen in a house. One is from a cured or a material that was applied in your house, like paint, adhesives, caulking, liquids that have to cure on site. Those particular materials generally off gas anywhere from 2.5 to 4.5 years.
Okay,
Yes, they reduce day after day after day. They're getting lower and lower. Also, the most odoriferous of the chemicals are coming off quicker,
right.
and then they get flushed out in your ventilation system. Um,
And then I want to ask, how do we expedite that? Is there
right,
something we can do to mitigate that?
right,
My
exactly.
brain's going too fast. I keep
Sure, that's
interrupting
all right.
you.
The other part would be things like carpeting, particle board, plywood, things that aren't curing on site but are manufactured and brought into your home. I've tested carpeting that's 32 years old that still releases dangerous levels of formaldehyde.
Yeah, yikes. So
So
someone who's uber sensitive, yeah, even that's a problem.
correct.
Yep.
And so here's the thing. Our bodies are absolutely amazing. Our brain can mask just about anything. And so this brings up the conversation of chemical sensitivity.
Yeah.
But let's say, for instance, you've never had a puff of a cigarette, and you take your first puff of a cigarette, you cough it out because your lungs are saying, no way do I want this,
Rejecting that, yes.
rejecting it. Well, carpet is the exact same way. You reject it when you first move into a new home. Anybody who moves in a new home probably gets like these flu-like symptoms, run down, sniffles, itchy eyes. We all chalk it up to it's been stressful getting into the house. We all got a little under the weather, but it's
Sure.
really the building materials. It's been estimated anywhere between 8 to 10,000 chemicals in the air at any given time in a new building.
Wow.
Now, with something like carpet that has a very strong aroma, if you install carpet in a new house, and now after about 6 months, go on vacation for a week or two, come back to the house, the very first thing you'll smell is the new carpet because your brain will mask the odor because your brain says, well, I guess it's going to be here. So let's just live with it. People with chemical sensitivity, however, they don't have that ability because, inside the body, the best way I describe it is inside the body, we're all born with like this 55-gallon drum that absorbs toxins in the air through our skin, what we eat. And then there's a filter at the bottom that processes it and we're good. Well, people with chemical sensitivity, that drum overflows and it never stops overflowing. So any little bit of chemical can cause a triggered reaction. And so that's why there is no what's the safe point for them in some of these things?
Right. Their threshold is different than, yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So back to the carpet, though,
The
there's a
safe
brand out of
carpet. Yeah. Yeah.
Dalton, Georgia called Earthweave.
Earthweave. Okay.
Earthweave is one of the best carpets we've ever worked with. It's truly synthetic free. There's also a carpet manufacturer out of Toronto or Vancouver called Nature's Carpet.
And do you sell those? I mean, do you
I do. I
so
do.
if someone wanted to build a house and use those products, the builder
Mhm.
could get them wholesale, or someone like me could purchase retail from you, could purchase those
Correct.
products. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we actually, secret, I would say between you and I, but in your audience, we sell everybody at the wholesale pricing
Well, how
because,
do you make money? Just kidding.
well, I mean, the fact of the matter is
Yeah.
that I don't like playing the games of giving contractors discounts because they're just taking a discount and pocketing the difference. They're
Sure.
not now using
Sure.
that to promote our products down the road. So my thought is you're the one making the decision. You're the one ultimately paying the bill. So why don't you get the best deal?
I'll take it. That's
Yep.
honorable. Okay. Okay, so let me go back to, I know I was jumping around there. Is there anything we can do in a new home? Let's say someone just built a new home.
Yes.
They're listening to this podcast and they're thinking, oh crap, everything is off gassing in my home. What can they do to mitigate or reduce the off gassing, expedite that? Maybe what would have been 4 years of bad off gassing. Can they reduce that? What can they do?
So years ago, there used to be a theory that you could heat up the space to 90 to 95 degrees
Hmm.
and what's called a bakeout, where you heat up everything so it excites the chemicals, they become airborne, and then you flush out the air. That particular method has been debunked many times. And so, but yet I still hear this on a daily basis from customers. Well, can't I just bake out the house? No, because what happens is you create new chemical compounds that would never exist. So it's really
Well,
kind of
that's
robbing
worse.
Peter to pay
Yeah.
Paul. It really
Yeah.
doesn't work. So what can you do to speed things up? Well, there's
What
really
about
nothing
air
you can do to
filtration
speed
or
it up.
air scrubbers or yeah.
Correct. So air filtration is what you're going to do to essentially mitigate what has now become airborne. Um, Air filtration, specifically the use of carbon. Carbon will absorb and dissipate VOCs, gases, formaldehyde, things of that nature.
Good. Okay.
Uh, so I always recommend an air purification system. Is a brand we work with called Solace Air that uses carbon. It uses a HEPA filter, a particulate filter for your particles, and it also uses UV to kill off pathogens, mold, spores, viruses, bacteria.
Is that like a standalone unit or something you put on the HVAC?
It's actually connected directly to the HVAC system, so all the air is going through that.
What's that called again?
It's called Solace,
Solace. Okay.
SOLACE, Air RS4.
Okay.
Now, I want to touch on a couple things that I started talking about before. the things that you see and touch on a daily basis
Yeah.
that are the big issues. Flooring, number one. Number two are all your painted surfaces, your walls, your ceilings. Now, again, like I said, those will off gas anywhere from 2.5 to 4.5 years. Number three, cabinetry. Now, in a home, if you look at the area of all the walls in all the rooms, cabinetry does not make up a very large percentage. However, cabinets are they're made of plywood, particle board, veneers, glues, and finishes.
Bad, bad, and
And
bad.
right. And what happens is every morning we wake up and we go into the kitchen, we grab a ceramic mug to make our first cup of tea, and so we want to open up the cabinet. We get rushed in the face with this smell of the cabinet.
I'm just thinking also any porous material that's being stored in the cabinets, like paper plates, or like
Correct.
could also absorb any of that. Ugh.
Correct. And then on top of this is moisture. And so, this is a conversation that will sort of lead into the whole mold thing. But
Yeah.
honestly, in a home, whether it's a new home or existing home, elevated moisture, elevated humidity will actually increase chemical off-gassing. And
And
so,
mold. Yeah.
and mold, of course. And so, what happens is when moisture leaves a surface, it carries with it the chemical footprint of where it was. And I found this out by doing testing myself. I would do formaldehyde testing of carpeting, of woods, and so forth.
How do you do
And I
that?
found that if I could reduce the humidity in a home, 20%, go from 60 down to 40%,
Yeah.
and leave it at that space for about 2 to 3 weeks, I'd go back and test the exact same surfaces, and the off-gassing would be far less.
Okay. How do you test? And you see
Yeah.
everything you say, I want to ask you another question on. And what should the goal be from a humidity standpoint? What do we want to keep that under in the home?
Yeah. So, how do I test? I actually have a testing system called a FRAT test, formaldehyde release attenuation test.
Hmm.
We're the North American exclusive for this testing system. We
Cool.
actually can place little sensors on every surface of your house, or people send me samples from all over the country to test if they want to see if their flooring material or their draperies are releasing formaldehyde.
Yeah.
I can test to tell you down to 1 part per billion how much formaldehyde is coming from that surface. Now, in a home, depends on where you live, of course. Dry climate, more moist climate.
Sure.
I would like to see a home somewhere between, I think, ideal 40 to 45% humidity.
Yep, I would agree. I usually tell patients try to keep it below 40. You're in Wisconsin, right? And we're in
Yes,
Iowa, so similar climates. Yep.
correct.
So I may
Yes.
go off on another tangent here.
Okay.
So we have this health clinic, right? And obviously I see a lot of patients with mold illness. And so I
Mhm.
certainly don't want them to ever see like water damage on the ceiling tiles here. Like we had
Mhm.
one little roof leak. I'm paranoid about that, right? You have to get everything fixed. Our air conditioning units were very old. I think the building was like 18 years old. So they were dying. Long story short, we ended up purchasing our building, and the landlord would not replace the air conditioning units, even though they were like off gassing, well, not off gassing, but leaking carbon monoxide. It was a bad situation. So we thought
Okay.
immediately we want healthy, clean air for our patients. So we replaced the two air conditioning units. And boy, do they work. I mean, they're able to cool the place down, but the humidity immediately went up in the space. And I'm very sensitive to temperature and to humidity. I can tell by my frizzy hair, like you
Yeah,
walk in
sure.
and the humidity, I mean, I literally have a humidity gauge on my desk
Mhm.
right here.
Yep.
It's way higher than 40%. I'll say that. So I reached out to the company who installed air conditioning units, and of course they say, "Oh, this is totally normal. It's totally normal." They said these units are so new and so powerful, they're pulling more air into your space,
Mhm.
so it's just going to be more. There's going to be more humidity,
Yes.
and I'm not okay with that.
No.
So they had no solution other than to put a dehumidifier on the unit itself. So,
Yep.
right now I immediately went and purchased dehumidifiers that are sitting in the hallways of the clinic because I don't want patients are walking in saying it's humid. I can feel moisture in here. I have to, as a business owner, I need to fix this. Got to
Sure.
practice what I preach. But what is your take on that? And how do I best fix that problem? I'm getting free advice here. Do I put a
Yeah.
do
No,
this?
this is great. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
these are the issues that my clients deal with on a daily basis all throughout the country. So I mean, it's a fantastic question. It's an unfortunate situation. I would say that quite often the reason why you're getting into this problem, it's not because of the fact that, okay, It is because of the fact that the new units are much more efficient. They do pull in more air from the outside, and they do cool down much more rapidly.
Yep.
Here's the kicker. A lot of times the HVAC contractor does not do what's called a manual J calculation.
Whatever that is. Yeah.
Manual J calculation is a calculation to determine the heating and cooling load of a building based upon square footage, cubic footage, how far away from the units all the rooms are, and
Yeah.
how big or small to make the HVAC system. And because they don't do the manual J calculation, they end up over installing, or they install a system that's far too big for the space.
Maybe
And
that's what
that
happened to
causes
us.
elevated
Yeah.
humidity.
Well, that's probably what happened to us. Okay. Well, I already paid for these units. I can't return them. So,
No, you can't, but you can certainly tell them to do their part to fix it. Now, how do you fix it? Yeah, you have to install a dehumidifier, but
dehumidifier
it has to be an inline dehumidifier so that all the air that's coming into the unit from the outside is dehumidified before it gets pushed through the blower and the AC.
versus the standalone units I have in the hallway now. Yes, that's taking moisture out of the air, but it's not
It'll
dehumidifying
never
it
keep
before
up.
it enters the, yeah, we'll never
It'll
keep up.
never keep up. And so the biggest
Ah,
issue,
makes me
the
so
biggest
mad.
issue,
Yeah.
right? The biggest issue is that all that humidity that's coming into the unit now and then being condensed rapidly because of how large this system is, it's causing a lot of condensation in the inside is what's called a drip pan. And there's more probably water sitting in there that's supposed to get drained away. But this is where you run into bacterial issues and mold issues because of more water, more opportunity for problems.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I instinctually knew just because I felt like it was too humid, we needed to do something. It's just unfortunate. And I wish I would have, known this and they could have done that calculation or whatever. But I just listened to them and purchased the units. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners have been in similar situations. And so
Yes.
there's still hope. There's something I can do. It's just going to cost more money,
Sure.
but that's okay.
Yeah, it's a problem throughout the industry
Yeah.
for some reason. I will say this, there's a lot of good HVAC technicians out there, but for the most part, they're not scientists. They're contractors who do a
Yeah.
job of installing equipment. They don't know how to do the scientific calculations that really are required when you're installing things like this to make sure you're not overspending, over installing, and just having, either way too much cold air or way too little cold air.
Right. I want to go back to VOCs, but I also feel like maybe we should stay on the HVAC topic. So
Sure.
I was obviously talking about a commercial space, but what about with a residential space? So let's say someone does have a new build,
Mhm.
or even for an existing home, what are some things, if we stay on this moisture topic also, that they need to be aware of to make sure that the HVAC is installed appropriately and that it isn't, like you're saying, leaving more water condensation, which can brew mold?
Yeah, and I will say that more and more of my conversations around the country are dealing with moisture on a daily basis. It used to be that 95% of my conversations were with people with chemical sensitivity. How do I repaint a room without poisoning my family and so forth? Nowadays, it's about 50-50. People who are really worried about mold,
Yeah.
people really worried about chemicals, and actually the two are intertwined.
Yep.
As I mentioned before, elevated humidity is elevated off gassing. It's also elevated mold possibilities, right? Inside of a home, whether it's a new home or existing, understand those areas where off gassing comes from. Understand that elevated moisture brings elevated off gassing and then an elevated chance of mold. So how do we get rid of it? Well, we got to make sure that we are monitoring what our humidity levels are in the house. I recommend that everybody buys at least one digital hydrometer. It's a $15 thing you can buy from Ace Hardware.
Like
Put
this, a
one,
little gauge, you mean?
exactly
Okay.
right. One
Yep.
of
Yep.
those. Put one of those on every floor of the home, basement, first floor, second floor, if you have it. Every day, you're going to look at it. You can look at it 5 times a day. You'll get 5 different readings because it always goes up and down. It with the sunrise and set, with pressure, with people in this house. But after a few weeks, you start to get averages.
Sure.
You start to see where you're at. And after a few weeks, you can say, all right, well, my basement's at 60. My first floor is at 56. My second floor is at 52. And that's kind of, it usually goes, it gets better as it goes up, right? At that point, you have to decide, how do we take care of it? Or first of all, are there any signs of it being problematic?
Sure.
Is there any sign of mold in the basement? Is there that typical musty smell down there? that is usually a combination of moisture and lime coming from the concrete. Sometimes it can be mold. Usually it's not, unless you've had a water situation for a longer period of time. First floor, same thing. Do we actually have signs of mold somewhere? Usually in the bathrooms, because that's where moisture congregates.
Yep.
If you do, is it just simply what's called mildew, which is surface mold that wipes off very easy? Or has it colonized and actually started to eat into the paint? That would be mold.
Yep.
Okay. If it's simply mildew that can be cleaned off, that's probably a situation where your bathroom just needs a better ventilation fan
Yep.
and it needs to be used more often.
Yep.
I think most people, and nowadays it's building code, you have to have a ventilation fan in the bathroom, but nobody likes the noise. People forget to turn it on. Honestly, you should use a bathroom fan every time you shower or bathe, up about 20 to 30 minutes after you're done, to get rid of that moisture.
20 to 30 minutes after.
Yep.
Yeah. I always
Yep.
keep it on, but not that long. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. And so what happens is when you shower, steam, yes, goes into the air, but it's also carrying with it soap scum and dead skin cells. And that stuff sticks to the wall with that moisture. And eventually it dries. And then it re-wets and it dries and re-wets and it dries. And this cycle occurs. And then we all know that mold is everywhere. It's inside, it's outside, it's natural. You're never going to get rid of it completely. But eventually a spore is going to find its way into the bathroom and say, hey, this is a great environment. I'm going to stay here. And that's what happens. And so it feeds off of those dead skin cells and the soap scum.
Mm-hmm.
If you get rid of that steam as it's occurring and get rid of that moisture, there's less likely a chance it's going to stick.
Right. At least what I've always been taught is mold really only needs a few things to survive: moisture, and then also food. So like
Yes.
the drywall, whatnot, right? That's why I feel like it can grow on concrete, but it's more likely to grow in the drywall versus the concrete or whatnot.
Yeah.
But yeah,
it needs an organic material to grow
Yes.
onto or feed off of. And
yeah,
so,
exactly.
It's been said that, people have said, oh yeah, mold can grow on concrete. Well, sure, if that concrete has something organic on it, whether it's, human dead skin cells or whether it's old adhesive, sure, it can grow on that concrete, but it's not going to feed off the concrete itself.
Sure.
There's no organic material that it could feed off of. In a bathroom, if it sits there long enough, it starts to feed off the paint. It starts to feed off the drywall paper. It starts to feed off the wood. And if that moisture has found its way back through the drywall into the wood studs, now you got a problem.
Now we definitely have a problem. Yep. Let me go back to, I lost my train of thought. Okay, so if someone's humidity, you're recommending they're using their humidity gauge, right, throughout the different levels of their home. If someone determines that the humidity really is too high in the home, then are you also recommending they have a dehumidifier installed onto their HVAC system? Is that?
I am. I'll argue that dehumidification is probably needed in about 98% of the country.
So everybody, yeah.
Yes. And so the problem is that in all regions of the country, HVAC systems are installed differently. So you're in Iowa, I'm in Wisconsin. Most of us have basements up here. And so usually the HVAC system is down in the basement, and there's plenty of room to put add-on equipment like dehumidifiers and purifiers and so forth. And all of the ductwork, all the equipment is within what's called a conditioned space. In other parts of the country where HVAC systems are put up in attics, that is unconditioned space. And so now you have your equipment up in the attic, and with HVAC systems, there's all these little cracks and crevices around the filter frame and around the frame itself and the blower. All that attic air gets sucked into the HVAC as you go along, and this is where you bring in humidity and mold.
Yeah.
And so we really have to be concerned about how these units are installed, how they're serviced, how they're protected. But you also have to make sure that dehumidification is involved in the process, because even in a new home, the average new home built today has between 400 and 500 gallons of moisture in the air just from the building process, from the concrete curing, the paint curing, the wood releasing moisture. And what's going to happen is, especially up here in the northern climate, in the middle of winter, when it's 7 degrees inside of the house and it's -2 outside, you're going to get condensation building up in the glass because of the moisture in the house. That condensation falls down to the windowsill, sits there if we don't take care of it, and starts becoming problematic down the road. And so we want to get rid of that moisture out of the air when we can.
So that's, key tip. Very good. Okay. Let's go back to VOCs. So what exactly are VOCs?
All right, good question. I had to take a sip of
Yeah,
water for that one.
volatile organic compounds. I'll say that,
Yeah,
but I'll
so
give you okay.
volatile organic compounds, it sounds so horrible. It's a compound, it's volatile. What that just means is it's a carbon-based molecule that's readily vaporized at room temperature that could rise to the upper atmosphere, react with nitrogen and UV to create low-level smog.
Okay.
That's the official EPA definition of what a VOC is. In the building industry, in consumer goods, we are being told VOC levels as if it actually makes a difference to you and I. Now, inside of your house, you do not have enough nitrogen and you do not have enough UV to create smog in your
Right.
house. So VOCs by themselves aren't necessarily a dangerous metric. Okay. It is true. Some VOCs are harmful for humans in direct contact or acute situations. It is also true that some VOCs are completely harmless to humans in those same situations. And I think the most unknown truth is out of the 92,000 chemicals that we have in building materials and home goods, only a few hundred of them are actually classified as VOCs and monitored. So we spend an awful lot of time and energy focusing on VOCs when manufacturers are allowed to use so many other toxins in their materials that aren't VOCs, aren't regulated, they don't have to be disclosed, and those are causing the bigger problem. So I'll give you some real world examples.
Sure.
In the paint industry, years ago, paint manufacturers, when they started making water-based paints, they used ethylene glycol as one of the additives and propylene glycol as one of the additives. Both of them kind of do the same thing. They allow the paint to stay wet at the edge so you don't get lap lines. It allows the paint to flow out nice and even, look nice as it's curing. When the VOC regulations came along, the government said you can't use any more glycols. So manufacturers had to take the glycols out completely, even though ethylene glycol is toxic to humans and it's antifreeze for your car.
I was going to say, it sounds like antifreeze. Yeah.
Yep. Propylene glycol, especially used in paints and coatings, is completely harmless to humans. It's actually used in commercial baking, right? But they're both painted with the same broad brush. So manufacturers had to do one of two things: either increase the acrylic resin content, or to keep things less expensive, they would add back in what are called unregulated chemicals: ammonia, acetone, and butyl acetate. Most zero VOC paints in the market contain one or all three of those, and they don't have to tell you because they're not regulated.
So you're saying VOC free is a kind of a marketing
The marketing
scheme, and that
Yep.
it doesn't mean it's safe. Let me
It
go back
doesn't
to
mean it's
VOC.
safe for humans.
Let me go back to VOCs though for a second here, because I
Yes.
guess I always thought VOCs were bad though, like that they're proven carcinogens, right? That they can cause respiratory irritation and headaches and central nervous system issues.
Right.
And so some VOCs are bad, right?
Yes.
You're
Yes.
just saying
Some
not
VOCs
all.
are bad.
Okay.
So another example, formaldehyde is a VOC,
Okay.
but it's not classified as a VOC because it's tested differently by the EPA. It's a carcinogen, yes. But when you get a report on VOCs in paint, it won't include the formaldehyde level because that's not a VOC in the eyes of the EPA.
Okay. So what do we want to look for?
Well, you
And
want to look for products that are considered toxin free.
toxin free.
You want to
Okay.
look
So,
for
and I
products that are
assume you
designed to
have some
be,
of those. So what?
yeah, yep, the AFM Safeco brand. We
So
want to
tell
look
me
for
their
products that are,
story. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I will. It's just the whole VOC issue. I've been fighting this battle for 25 years since the VOC regs came out. The fact of the matter is that they're regulated because of outdoor air pollution only. There's no regulation on the books for VOCs because of human health concerns. You know, when you wake up in the morning, I talked about grabbing that cup for a cup of tea. Let's say you sliced an orange for breakfast. You've now released 850 grams per liter of VOCs. That's not dangerous.
Right.
So if we're looking at VOCs with out of context, we're thinking all VOCs are bad. Well, I guess we can't have oranges anymore, right? Or all these other foods that are naturally containing VOCs, or we can't walk in a forest because of all the VOCs coming from the pine trees. So we have to look at um, this in context, the
Sure.
toxicity of each ingredient. And so
Sure.
this is where it makes a bigger difference.
Got it. Okay, tell me about the brand that
Mhm.
you sell that
Yeah.
I'm going to say it wrong. AF, what is it? AFM?
AFM, yes.
Yes. So why is
So
this safe? What makes it different?
when I had that problem on that job site many years ago, when I found AFM, AFM was a small company working on a garage, I think, in outside of LA, and they were making products. Actually, the guy who started AFM, a man named Nestor No, he was a chemist in the paint industry, and he's been developing paints and coatings his entire career. Well, he gets to the tail end of his career, finds out that he's been diagnosed with cancer,
Mm,
and he's suffering himself from chemical sensitivities. He goes down to a clinic in Texas called the American Environmental Health Foundation, and he detoxes his body from all the chemicals. He works with a fellow named Dr. Bill Ray, and they determine it's because of what he's been doing his entire career, right? So he gets out of the clinic, he comes back to California and says, I'm going to start a company doing nothing but formulating toxin free paints and coatings and sealers.
very
And he
cool.
literally made it his life ending mission to develop these materials so that other people would have something safer to work with. So all the materials that AFM makes are designed to be the least toxic in their category for what they do.
So they have paint, but do they have like finishings for cabinets and
Mm-hmm.
like flooring, or flooring might be
So
different?
AFM specializes in paints, coatings, and specialty sealers.
Got it.
About 57 different products ranging from wood stains, clear finishes for wood, painted finishes for cabinetry and furniture. They even have custom coatings for below grade waterproofing, for sealing ductwork seams, for even clear finishes for sealing up formaldehyde off gassing coming from carpet fibers. So they really have a broad range of materials. Again, at the end of the day, it's all to make the life of the homeowner safer, healthier.
Mhm.
It's, I say this all the time, but it really makes a lot of sense. We don't strive for perfection. It's impossible to live
Right.
in the perfect, healthy home. We strive for tolerance. So if we can reduce the chemical off gassing of the carpet by 80%, we can reduce the chemical off gassing of your walls and floors by 95%. Imagine what that does, when you combine all of these improvements.
Okay, so my son, I have a 4.5-year-old son. He wants his bedroom to be transformed. He's done with dinosaurs. He's ready for superheroes. So if I if I order paint,
Mhm.
like you have different colors of paint. It's
Yep.
like it's not just the yeah, okay. So am I if I and let's say I paint one wall in his bedroom, am I gonna smell that? Is it still going to off gas? Like
So
yeah,
actually, it's a great way to put that question, Stephanie. So here's what happens when you put a water-based paint on a surface, and I'm taking anybody's water-based paint, doesn't matter who. Water-based paint takes about 7 to 10 days to reach a full cure. After 24 hours, it's about 95% cured. The last 5% takes between 7 and 10 days later. Okay.
okay. Also didn't know that. Okay.
Now, after paint cures fully, this is when off gassing starts.
Okay.
Off gassing, technically speaking, off gassing is the release of unreacted chemical monomers that will never become part of the coating. So it essentially pokes out of the coating like dust, these little dusty chemicals that are coming off the coating. And that's what off gassing is. It's not actually like steam coming off a bowl of hot water. Steam, if you had a bowl of hot water and you put a piece of saran wrap over it, it would actually build up a head of pressure underneath that saran wrap. And you can poke a hole in that saran wrap, all the steam and eventually all the water comes out of that bowl. Now, on a wall with off gassing, it doesn't work the same way. You don't get like all the off gassing just coming. It comes off in this dust formation
Mhm.
throughout the years, 2.5 to 4.5 years. With Safe Coat paints, they've formulated a paint that once it reaches that full cure, it's completely catalyzed. So there is no free monomers. So they react out all those monomers before they blend. So there is no free monomers that just exist.
Does that equate to there is no smell?
So, okay, so no. What makes Safe Coat also unique is that it's designed specifically for chemical sensitive customers.
Okay.
One of the things about paints and coatings is you have to remember most manufacturers add in what are called chemical masking agents to hide the smells. So you think of like sound deadening headphones. You put them on, all the ambient noise goes away because it's just adding different sounds to your ear. Same thing with paint. One chemical plus another chemical equals no smell. So they'll add that in at the factory. People will still complain about getting headaches, feeling sick, can't walk in their house for 6 months or longer, doesn't smell, but all these chemicals are existing, probably even more.
Wow.
Safecoat does not add chemical masking agents because their point is we're trying to minimize the ingredients we need to use just to make a high quality product. So in the first 24 hours, it kind of has sort of a earthy smell, mineral, because that's a high mineral content, high
Okay.
resin content paint. But after about 24 hours, provided you have good ventilation, really the most thing you'll see is just the new color in your house.
Okay, wonderful. I want to go back, well, like back, whatever. We've been on this topic of chemical sensitivities this whole time, but I know many of your clients have chemical sensitivities and many of my patients do as well.
Yeah.
So can you share some case studies or some recent clients you've had who have had chemical sensitivities who you have assisted in some way to kind of build this healthier home?
Yes. I've worked with over 32,000 people in my career, in a 30+ year career, and ranging from, can you help me remodel a bathroom? Can you recommend a product for this or that too? Can you help me rebuild or build a new home? I'm going to give you a couple of examples to start. First one is one of my very first large customers that I had back in 1995. Uh, she called me one day saying that she's been living in one room of her house for the last 2 years that has been coated with aluminum foil, floors, walls, and ceiling, because she couldn't tolerate the off-gassing from anything. She was afraid that, I mean, she couldn't leave the room because she was afraid of what she'd be exposed to.
Oh,
Very, very sad situation. However, within the next year to 15 months, her husband, myself, we actually put together a plan to remodel the rest of the home using a lot of the AFM products, using a lot of the flooring materials that I recommend, different insulations. And now to this day, she still lives in that home. I don't
but
want to
not
say
in that room.
symptom, right, but not in that room. And not symptom free, of course, because she still has to, be in the world, but
Yeah.
to be able to heal in that house. And that's really the goal. That taught me a lot many, many years ago, taught me an awful lot. Now, fast forward last year, a good customer of mine who I've helped remodel her home 3 or 4 times to various rooms. She hired me to consult with a builder and an architect to design and build a healthy home from the start, completely from just a raw piece of dirt. And we did that. And she moved in May. Uh, I can't tell you the feeling it is when somebody calls up. You can just tell they're smiling. You can tell that they're just in awe of what has transpired. She lives in this house today. Matter of fact, another client of mine who extremely sensitive, who's been afraid to start the process. I'll get into
Mm.
that in a second. I walked her through that home. And the second she walked into the door, she started laughing because she was so excited that she could actually walk into a new home without, passing out, essentially. So I said, I get back to this. A lot of times, people who have chemical sensitivity, because they are so used to being inundated with chemical, their brain and their body is in constant fight or flight. It's
Hmm.
a constant adrenaline release. What happens is they get really it's being scared to take the first step, because what if it doesn't
Yeah.
work?
Right.
What if I walk in that room and that room has something behind that door that I can't tolerate? So they're not going to go through that door. It's like that customer I had with the aluminum coated walls. What if? And that becomes a huge, huge crutch. And so they have to prove to themselves that it's actually going to work.
Hmm.
And so she took the brave step of actually walking into that space and saying, yes, it did work. This is on a smaller scale what I do with clients all over the world. When somebody says, I need to repaint, but I'm afraid what'll happen if I can't tolerate the paint. So we offer small samples of our paints.
Yeah.
Test it. Test the paint, test the flooring, however method of testing you do, whether it's simply just putting it on the nightstand next to you while you sleep, or put it in a jar and then just, take a smell of it after it cures, or you do muscle testing, whatever you do, test it the way you normally would. And let's be sure that every component that goes into that home you have tested okay with, so that you'll never be surprised. You'll never go into that fight or flight response.
Love that. Yeah, I think a lot of these patients have just been traumatized and they've suffered for so long that they have this almost
Yes.
decision constipation and they're just stuck. And yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And I hear it every day, and I don't blame them. It's, at some point you finally say, I can't do that. I know, I've been like this for however long. I know it's not going to work. And unfortunately, you can never move on from that until you allow yourself to do so.
Mhm.
And how do you allow yourself to do so? There's no magic potion for that. It's essentially, I don't want to say retraining the brain, but you
Well,
have
so
to
there
start
is some of
trusting.
that. We
Yeah.
send our patients for limbic
Oh,
retraining.
yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
there is some degree of that. And I'll put a plug in here for functional medicine because obviously you're helping with these
Yeah.
individuals eliminating minimizing, maybe not entirely, but trying to eliminate the exposure, right?
Hmm.
And then we help the patient detoxify the body. So I have to put a plug in for functional medicine because that,
Yeah.
can help give these patients kind of the building blocks. Or maybe we're the one who's finding mold in their body and then they
Yep.
know, oh, if that's coming from somewhere, they identify it's their home. And then, yeah. So,
Exactly right. It all works
so
together. And so
yep.
it's interesting. I have found over the last 30 some years that, the whole, the built environment, um, the way humans work, everything works together, and you have to be able, that's why building biology, the study of the human interaction within the built environment. I love that concept. I was on the board of directors of that organization for years. I wholeheartedly recommend them. And you're right, there's not a lot of these building biologists around the country. If you can find one, great. If not, I mean, I do remote work all over the world. The fact is that the built environment, just like your diet, has a huge say on how you sleep, how you feel. And the best, the best physicians I've ever worked with, for me personally, over my 52 years of life, were the ones that asked me the question, how do you feel? They'll look at test results, whatever, but how do you feel? And
Mhm.
when you walk into that home, are you instantly aggravated? Are you instantly annoyed because something is causing a problem? It could be something simple as you just painted the wrong color and it's causing a issue because of traditional color therapy or theory. It also could be the fact that your building materials are off gassing
Mhm.
and your body's telling you.
Yes, yes. I could ask you so many questions. We've covered a lot. I want to go over just a few more things here. So, what's the problem with the finished basement?
Mhm.
Like, are finished basements, I guess, are they problematic? That was one thing that I was concerned about. I know, at least with new construction, like, what can I do extra to? I'm more paranoid about, I'll just admit, I'm paranoid about mold. So,
Sure.
um, how do you feel about finished basements? I know I could put words in your mouth. I'll let you answer.
Sure. Well, so um, you're my client right now. I say, well, when was the home built?
Well, for my house, I
Yeah.
mean, I think my current basement is okay. I'm more
Okay.
questioning with new construction,
Sure. But
Yeah,
I would ask you, well, when was your
yeah.
home built?
I think it
So
was
be
like, yeah, 13 years ago. I don't
okay.
remember, but yeah.
So the question comes down to, was the home built for the basement to be a livable space? Now, remember, years ago, when builders first started doing basements, it was mainly just to house mechanicals, and it was storage
Storage.
or a
Yeah,
root cellar or whatever. We could care less about how it looks, how it smells. Nobody went down there. It was cobwebs,
sure.
and a couple of lights. A finished basement is asking for a little more out of the construction process. You have to make sure that the walls and the underneath this concrete slab, the floor, are truly waterproof, not just damp proofed, not just, putting a black asphaltic coating on the outside of the walls because that degrades in 6 months, but
So how do you
truly,
do that? How do you waterproof a basement? I mean, in short, and of course.
well, you have to do it during construction. If you can't, if you have to get to it after you've moved in and you find out you've got moisture issues, you've got to then excavate the exterior and re-waterproof it, put a real waterproofing system on. So I guess, I mean, to answer the question, if the basement was built for a livable space in mind,
Yeah, I
and you
would
can
assume
verify
ours
from the
was.
builder
Yeah, yeah.
that it was waterproof, then I have no problem with finished
Okay,
basements.
okay.
Um, you have to remember what we talked about earlier. Humidity is typically higher in basements. Why? Because most basements aren't waterproof correctly, and it
Mm,
just comes through the earth, right?
yeah.
Um, so you have to monitor humidity. You have to look at the obvious things. Um, I also I'm not a big fan of putting carpeting in basements because carpeting absorbs and retains moisture, which also will absorb and retain mold spores, and it can be
Yeah.
problematic down the road. So there are ways to fix things if you find that maybe it's not the perfect environment. But generally speaking, I'm okay with finished basements provided that it's done correctly.
Okay. What about kind of what are some of your favorite, I don't know if I should say it this way, antimicrobial countertops for
Mhm.
kitchens and bathrooms?
Yeah. So I believe that any countertop that has an antimicrobial additive built into it should be avoided.
Okay, so there aren't any yet.
Well,
No.
I'll give you a caveat there. So a couple of manufacturers years ago started incorporating microban into their countertops. Microban is it's a brand name of a pesticide called triclosan. And
Oh,
yeah.
didn't know
And
that
so,
either. Yeah.
yep. And so anything that's got microban in it, it's basically triclosan. Um, Countertop manufacturers realized that it probably wasn't a good thing to have people touching microban all the time. So they actually started phasing it out. Now, there are some companies on the market that are starting to incorporate high levels of titanium dioxide and silver microparticles
Yeah,
in the surface
that's
of their
cool. Yeah.
countertops,
Yeah.
naturally antimicrobial.
Yep. We sell lots of silver here. Yeah.
Excellent. And so I think you're going to see more and more of that coming out in the coming years. The pandemic did an awful lot to raise awareness of how dirty our surfaces and our spaces really are. Uh,
Sure.
and you're going to see that in paints and coatings as well.
Awesome.
Uh, but I do think that there's really nothing that replaces good old fashioned soap and warm water.
Agreed, agreed. We talked a little bit about mold, and I guess I've had other guests come on the show that have talked about mold illness, but I feel like since we brought up, the importance of keeping moisture down in the home to prevent mold growth, we should also talk about kind of some side effects that one may experience when living in a moldy environment.
Sure.
I see patients with chronic inflammatory response syndrome with mold and Lyme, both many times. So I can kind of tell you my definition of that. And I guess you could also tell me what you hear from patients. But when
Sure.
patients have chronic inflammatory response syndrome, they can have multiple symptoms in multiple body systems. So what that means is you could have neurologic symptoms, right? So I have patients who get a lot of headaches. I see a lot of visual disturbances, which also, if you're listening at home and you feel like this could be you could also do a visual contrast sensitivity test online very affordably that can many times detect if you have one of these challenges. I also even see GI symptoms. One of my family members was living in a very moldy home and he came down with diarrhea, unfortunately. Getting out of the moldy home, his GI symptoms cleared up. So I see a lot of brain fog. Just again, back to the neurologic issues, it's not just headaches, but patients like walk into a room and they don't remember why they're there. They just can't recall things. They're not retaining things. So many times that fatigue, sets in, and patients are really getting concerned about, oh my gosh, do I have dementia? Like,
Right.
oh, what's happening?
Mm-hmm.
Which can many times just be mold or another toxin. What else do I see? A lot of vague symptoms which can just add up to the point where patients know something's not right. What from your experience, what do you hear from patients?
Well, I could certainly just say everything you said, not as eloquently, of course, but I think that I also see patients that are my clients that have children that are having developmental issues,
Yeah.
children that are having rage
Mm,
issues
behavior
because,
issues. Yeah.
yep, anger issues.
Back to neurologic
Yep.
system, but yeah.
So you have to remember your audience that mold creates a toxin. It's what's called an MVOC, or
We just
it's
call them
actually like,
mycotoxins. Yeah.
yeah, it's a toxin that is released during the growth period of mold that mimics a chemical release, and the body doesn't necessarily know the difference. At least I don't think it does right now. I think that in the last several years, science has done an awful lot in determining now that they have done it. What is it? The HLA-DR
Yeah.
genome
Yeah. We
test. Okay,
checked. Yeah. Yeah.
so now we know that 25% of the population is predisposed to have a mold sensitivity. It's funny. 25 years ago, when I was doing presentations to architectural associations, groups around the country, I had read an article out of Europe that stated that 25%, they estimated 25% of the world's population had a chemical sensitivity, whether they knew it or not. And now I hear that 25% of the population has a mold sensitivity. And then I hear that mold and chemicals and EMFs all kind of trigger the body the same way. And I'm wondering, is this all the same person?
Yeah, it
And
could
so,
be. Yeah.
but then with my clients, I find that yes, if they're suffering from SIRS,
Chronic
they
inflammatory response syndrome for the listeners. Yeah. Yep.
they have to stay away from anything that has a strong odor because it causes that trigger.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it doesn't have to be mold. It could be perfume. It could be, an orange. It could be something that doesn't even have a release of anything. But I had a client that actually reacted to stainless steel.
Wow. That's
It,
unfortunate. Yeah.
yes, it is. And so it can happen. And the fact of the matter is we don't know enough about that. We are learning. I mean, through what you are doing with your patients in your clinic and what others are doing around the world, we're learning about this sort of on the fly. But in the last 5 to 10 years, we have learned more than I've known in the last 30. And this
Yeah.
is, I
Yeah.
think we're in a very exciting time for what's going on right now.
I would agree. Kind of back to what you were alluding to earlier is like we each have this toxic burden or this bucket full of toxins that can accumulate throughout our life, right?
Mhm.
That's where, again, functional medicine practitioners can help you to dump out what's in that
Yeah.
bucket, help your body
Yes.
better eliminate. But what you're referring to is for some person, that one last smell or chemical or whatever, especially if they have like mast cell activation syndrome, is what
Yep.
pushes them over the edge. That bucket just kind of overflows.
Yes.
So yeah, we want to do everything we can to limit that burden on that in that patient.
Exactly right.
And if you're listening to this and you're again, what's the word, suspicious that this could be you, we certainly can test your immune system to see if you have chronic inflammatory response syndrome. And we can also look in your urine to see if you're eliminating mycotoxins. So there are a lot of tests that functional medicine practitioners like myself can offer you to help. So moving right along, I do want to ask your experience just in general to, working with contractors. Like, are they really receptive to this? I assume there's a lot of education on their end too. I mean, I personally have met with a couple contractors and they kind of looked at me like cross-eyed and they were kind and they said, I think I'd be open to that, but I also was kind of getting clearly I'm going to be one of their most complicated clients and they may
Yeah.
rather not sort of thing. They were polite, but what has your experience been working with contractors around the country?
So my experience is actually very similar to yours. I think that, and this used to bother me, when I was first doing this, it would annoy me so much, but I'd go to a contractor and say, listen, I can actually provide you products that won't poison you and your workers and your clients. Wouldn't
Hello,
you want
yes,
to
yes,
promote this?
yes.
And they would all kind of blow me off. And even architects would say, well, we'll save the information for that client who's really interested in this kind of stuff. I'm thinking, aren't we all interested in this? But it didn't make sense. And then
Yeah.
it
It's like a
dawned on me.
dentist who continues to put metal fillings in someone's
Right,
mouth and poison them and their employees. And it's like, what? This doesn't make sense. Something's
right.
not computing. But yeah,
So
sorry.
let's think of a contractor who's building homes day in and day out. They know exactly how a home gets built. They know the materials that they use. They understand how long it takes to do every step along the way. And somebody comes in and says, I want to change how you do this. Well, they're losing all the profit margin they have in that job. They're probably adding to their stress levels. Their subcontractors are going to hate them because they're saying, you can't do this, you can't do that. And of course, they don't like the problem customer. They don't like the hovering customer that says, look at that, look at that. It's like putting pieces of blue tape everywhere and saying, you screwed up everywhere. And so what I tell my customers is this: find a good quality custom home builder, right? Not a track home builder, not a, Toll Brothers, one of these companies that builds 1,000 homes a year. Find a customer that builds maybe 5 or 6 homes a year, or find a contractor that
Contractor.
builds
Yeah. Yeah.
5 or 6 homes a year. And so these contractors are used to having clients that come to them and say, here's my Pinterest page with 1,500 pictures of a kitchen. Can you do this? And the contractor's like, yep, we can tackle that. No problem. Custom home builders, in my experience, have been very, very receptive because they look at this as, I'm going to build a home for this couple or this family. They're going to be a good customer.
Yep.
They're going to recommend me to others, and I'm going to learn a little something. But you also have to approach it from a standpoint of, We're doing this because there's people in our household that have serious health issues,
Mhm.
and kind of leave it at that. Um, all too often, people with extreme chemical sensitivity, the way they approach a new contractor is, my name is so and so. I need some plumbing done in my house, but you can't use anything toxic because I react to everything. And this, and this, and this. Most often, contractors are going to say, very good. Thank you very much. And they'll never talk to you again. So you have to approach it in terms that they understand, which is, yeah, we have somebody in the household that's going through some really severe medical treatments. And I will tell you, 99 times out of 100, they will relate to somebody that they know either personally or they've heard of a friend of a friend. Yeah, I understand that. Sure. Yeah, we can do that. And they will have empathy. I think the good contractors will have that empathy, but
Yeah.
you have to appeal to that. You can't be that person who is instantly on the defensive, because you will push them away.
Good advice. Good advice. Okay. So what do you see as the future of healthy home building? I mean, you kind of already alluded to that. You think maybe things are turning around, and
Yeah.
I mean, I think your business is amazing, and I think that the more people that hear about it, at least obviously I'm attracting clients who live this lifestyle, who want what you offer, right? But
Yes.
not everybody's eyes have been opened yet.
Right.
So I'm excited about what you do, but what do you think kind of the future of healthy home building is?
So I think the future of healthy home building is eventually it's going to morph just into home building. I believe that
You are
we're
optimistic.
taking, yeah, we are taking small steps, baby steps over time. In my 30-year career, 30 plus years, we have gone from building homes the way we used to now building homes that are actually, by code, have to bring in fresh air from the outside. 30 years ago, we didn't care about the occupants of the home. It was well, a house needs to breathe. Well, actually, no, the occupants of the house need to breathe. The house
Mm-hmm.
could care less. So we're doing that. We are using better quality, less dangerous paints and coatings throughout our house. Things are being done because we're finally realizing that it's just smart to do so. Um, Again, waterproofing a basement to make sure that's a livable space. That wasn't done 30 years ago because we didn't know the difference. We didn't think
Sure.
about it. So I believe that maybe in another 30 years or so, homes will just be built healthier by default. But I don't think it'll ever be done the way, we all would like it done, because we are doing this because we understand that the way things are done normally just isn't good enough for us. And so I think that building a home with healthy attributes, again, it's not going to cost any more if you're comparing apples to apples. It really just takes somebody like me to work
Mm-hmm.
with the architect,
It's the
work with the
education.
builder,
Yeah, yeah.
education, and it's not only the education of why we are doing these things, but also, here's what I want you to use. Here's how long it's been in use. You got to show them where they can get it, how they can use it, and so that there's no downtime in the project, because downtime is lost profits and they don't
Yeah.
like that.
Yep. Yep.
But I also think that we have to strive for tolerance. We cannot strive for perfection. There is no such thing as a perfect home. You will drive yourself to the poorhouse or the nut house or both, trying to have a perfect, healthy home. Just have a home that's healthier to live in than it was last week.
Awesome. Mic drop. Okay, bonus round quickly. Do you have favorite non-toxic products under $50?
Favorite non-toxic products under $50. I love the Branch Basics brand of cleaning materials.
Sure. Perfect. Okay, what's on your 5-year plan?
We are actually we are in the planning stage of building a model healthy home where the entire process will be
Love it.
documented. Yep. Yeah,
Love
and
it.
I'm involved in a foundation called Clean the Air Foundation. We will be hopefully affecting policy changes at the local, state, and federal level to, for instance, making sure that HVAC contractors do their manual J calculations and don't provide the wrong materials for their customers.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, this has been amazing. Tell us where listeners can find you.
So the best place to find me is my website, thegreendesignCenter.com. From that, not only will you find all the materials that I've sort of curated over the last 30 years that I recommend,
Yeah.
but you'll also find links to my podcast, Non-Toxic Environments. You will find ways to connect with me in a consult.
Yep.
And you can book me for anything from a 15-minute conversation all the way to a whole year's worth of consulting for a whole project. So, I love my day where I'm talking to 17 different people about everything from fixing a screen door to, building a insulated concrete form house in the middle of Puerto Rico. It's fantastic.
And I hear you have a free gift for our listeners too. So
Yes, I do. And
very
so
generous. Yeah.
yeah, in your links when this comes out will be a link to book me for a free 15-minute conversation. Uh, doesn't matter what you want to talk about, your existing home, plans for a new home, maybe something that I talked about you want clarification on, and that link will be in your show notes, I'm sure.
Thank you so much. Okay, last question. What is your top longevity tip? You've given us a lot, but if you had to
Oh
pick
boy,
one.
top longevity tip. It's all about boy, clean air, clean water inside of your home, and making sure that the home environment, oh, the bedrooms, that's the best one I can say. The bedrooms should be the
Yeah.
healthiest rooms in the house. If you can't afford to do anything else in your home besides get a air purifier for one room, put it in your bedroom. Because if you can't get your restorative REM sleep every night, your body will never heal.
Totally agreed. Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on the show today and just sharing how important the health of our home is to our body's health and longevity. So I encourage listeners check out the greendesigncenter.com. I personally look forward to working with you. I'm sure I'll have you on again. So this was very informative. It was spectacular. Thank you again.
Thank you, Stephanie.